Thank you very much for the introduction and background information about the organization. This is great. I'd like to just check to make sure everyone can hear me. So I'm going to greet a couple of attendees by name, and I hope that's all right with you. So Jason, hello. John, welcome. Douglas, I see you've joined us. Samira and Darian, welcome. If of those who are attending could briefly say hello in the chat, and that would be helpful. And it would just be nice to see that everyone is able to share their comments and that everyone can hear me very well. All right, David and Zachary, thank you very much. Comments there. I will periodically be monitoring the chat session through today's presentation. So if you have a comment, you can certainly share it there. And we will have a dedicated Q&A segment at the end of today's session. So we will have time to go through questions in some depth. Let's look at today's agenda. We're going to cover innovation in a very broad way. We're first going to start with just kind of understanding what innovation is, because I find it can sometimes be a rather nebulous concept. And then we'll look at ideas versus execution, which I think is a very important principle to cover. We will then be going through 3 case studies from the history of innovation. My first 2 degrees were in the area of history, so it's always fun to revisit history and see what can we learn from those who have gone before us. Test studies will have a rather technology and science focus, so I hope you find that helpful. And we're going to close out with 2 specific lessons about what makes innovation happen and how can it be encouraged. So if you're finding yourself in a rather backward organization, perhaps, some of these observations about the people and environment may be helpful for you to innovation further. And toward the end of today's session, we'll have a Q&A segment of approximately 10 minutes or so, maybe a bit longer, maybe a bit shorter, but around about there. And I will also be presenting information about a free digital gift that I'm offering to attendees today. Information on how to obtain that will be covered at the end. So by all means, please do stay tuned for the Q&A and that free gift component. So let's proceed with today's session. I'm just going to have a little bit of water and then we will continue. So let's first define our terms. So the Oxford English Dictionary, which is a favorite of mine because it gives definitions based on actual usage of words and how they've changed over time, points out that innovation is really about bringing something new to the world. And more recently, innovation has been defined and seen as a product launch concept, the action of introducing a new product into the market. So some ideas about how innovation takes place and what it means. There is an interesting case to be made for other definitions of innovation. To give you an example, last year I had the opportunity to listen to an excellent keynote address by someone who had studied the innovation practices at Lego, a company that produces the plastic bricks that are popular with children. And innovation in that scenario was partly kind of different. They tried a whole variety of different kinds of products, and a key part of their approach to innovation was actually partnerships. And some of the most famous of those in the case of Lego would be taking Lego blocks and toys and pairing them with a popular and well-known story. Examples being Star Wars and Lord of the Rings, for example. So if you're looking for a contemporary and sort of offbeat example of innovation, Lego is a very interesting example. Turning our focus back to the area of technology innovation, as we are coming here together under Computer Aid Inc.'s auspices, I thought we would focus on /IT innovation. So in the book, The Innovators by Walter Isaacson, he lays out really 4 qualities that are important for really significant innovations. And I'll illustrate some of these with some examples. First of all is originality. So if you take a widget or a piece of technology and you add one new feature to it, that might be enough to get a new patent issued. And that's something to get the IP attorneys all excited. But you can really question, is this a meaningful innovation? The point, I think, is really important in the context of bringing a new product to the market, which is the number of the items that were produced and distributed. For example, during the 1930s, there were a number of different engineers, scientists, and researchers that created what we could call early computers. So, for example, there was a early what has been described as electromechanical computer created in Germany in the 1930s. This was prior to Enigma for those World War II history buffs. But in Isaacson's assessment, this 1930s German computer was not a significant innovation because there were only 1 or 2 prototypes ever created. Impact on society was quite limited in that case. These 2 final dimensions relating to social impact and future impact. An innovation like the office productivity software that is popularized by Lotus and Microsoft, huge social impact, millions of people. In contrast, a single prototype that is not widely shared or understood, not as significant an innovation. And then our final point here is really interesting to me to consider from a historical standpoint, which is the title of our session today is Standing on the Shoulders of Giants. So when you bring something new to the market, bring a new IT project in your company, the question can be asked, what innovations are you building on? And to look at from the other perspective, how can people build on what you're doing right now? Kind of interesting nitty-gritty kinds of implications. For example, if you build a highly innovative new IT project for use at your company, is anyone able to really build on it? Or is it documented? Because to be able to create innovations that other people can build on and ever greater value. Open source software would be a classic example of that ability to have a future impact because it's to other people developing and contributing to